This is the Get Savvy Show, brought to you by the Reluctant Leader Academy. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and on each episode, I'm going to help you get savvy to allow you and your business to grow. We'll be focusing on the 3 elements that lead to business success: your mindset, your processes, and your skills. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Get Savvy Show, brought to you by the Reluctant Leader Academy. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and today we are going to be talking about leadership and in particular agility in leadership with my guest, Mark Billedge, who is from Smart Culture. And we're also going to find out a bit more about his book that he's writing or written, soon to be released, I think, find out what that's about. So I think without further ado, I think we should bring Mark onto the show. Welcome, Mark.
Hi there, Mark.
How are you doing?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
We've had a few technical issues, so Mark's using his phone instead of his laptop, so forgive the little bit of shakiness that he's got to hold his phone. But apart from that, we're all ready to go. So before we get stuck into the show, Mark, do you want to just introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about what you do.
Yeah, sure. So Mark Billedge, I run a company called Smart Culture, which is really all about team development, leadership development. I'm passionate about teams thriving and collaborating together. I've been a CEO in a charity for the last few years, left that at the beginning of last year to do this. And as Mark has already mentioned, been writing a book called I See You, which is about to be published. So I work with teams to see if they can get to the next level, to get to the highest performance possible.
Good stuff. Great stuff. Okay, so we've got an idea of what we're going to talk about later. But those that know the show know that the first thing we go is to have a quick look at the motivators of our guest. So let's just go through what Mark's top 3 motivators are, as according to his motivational map, which he completed a few weeks ago. Number one is searcher. So the most important motivator for Mark is making a difference, doing something meaningful. Number two is spirit, which is about making their own decisions, freedom, autonomy, and having control over the decisions and time that he spends on things. And finally, creator. It's about doing innovative new things to solve problems. So Mark, summarising them quite quickly, those top three motivators, how do you see them being fulfilled in what you now do in your business?
Yeah, so I essentially left. I was in a cause-based organisation, so causes and purpose have always been really important to me, and I guess wanting to be as helpful to others to fulfil their potential. So I think that fits in terms of starting this new business, this smart culture. Yeah, I'm not. I do work with others, but I do enjoy the kind of idea of making my own decisions and making my own way through things, like improvement, like change, like to see how things can be done better. So yeah, I can see very much the innovation, the concept, the creativity. This allows me to do that. Obviously comes with all the other things you have to do as well, like administration and things like that. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a typical thing. People, you've talked about your background in a large sort of charity role, CEO, and a lot of people make that step into sort of entrepreneurial business ownership with regards so they can make their own decision, do things that they want to do. So it's not about not wanting to work with others. It's sometimes about making your own decisions and not having to toe the line from somebody else's decisions. I think that's what I hear most often. Right, and it seems to sort of fit in from what I can see. The top three motivators, they're very growth orientated, about looking to fulfill your potential going forward and make a difference in the world. So makes absolute sense with that regard. Good stuff. Okay, so we've covered that, and we might sort of mention that as we sort of cover the topic as we go along. So let's go back to that. You don't want to see me. So Mark, I think the best place to start is just tell us about your book and why you've written it.
Yeah, so one of the things I've observed is that often we get to see teams that are not fulfilling their potential. How can we get teams to perform at a higher level? Is every voice heard? Does everybody feel like they are well represented? Can they bring their opinions to the table? Those kinds of things. And what I've realised is that very much so is that the leader sets the culture. So ICU is basically leadership principles for transforming team culture, and go through various different things like what is culture. Often we don't realise as leaders that if we've been there any kind of length of time, probably 18 months, 2 years, it's our culture that we're seeing reflected before us. And if you're going to change that, then you need to be aware of what you can change and become more self-aware, that kind of thing. So how can leaders better help an environment where everybody can bring their voice, bring their best contribution? That's essentially what the book is about, and with practical applications that will help the leader do that.
Right. So I'm guessing there's going to be part in that book about being self-aware, understanding of yourself. Is that something that you cover in the book with regards to understand? Well, we talked about motivators, but also sort of behavioural styles and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it is. It's obviously a book's not always a great place to kind of deal with everything. You can't only deal with so much. So I do give pointers as to people as to where they can go, where they can find out about themselves. We all have tendencies. We all generally have blind spots of which we're unaware, which is obviously what they are. But I think it's important that leaders are aware of themselves, because leadership starts with yourself. You can't lead yourself. It's very difficult to lead others. So I think it's really important to do that.
And what about the actual catalyst to sort of go down this path then? Was there something that was the trigger that thought, right, this is what I really want to do, and now I want to sort of go in and help businesses sort of with their culture and create a better culture within their business is.
Yeah, well, because I mean, I think it's the amount of time we spend at work, isn't it? The amount of time that we're doing something. We all spend probably most a good proportion of our lives doing that kind of thing. We come together for purpose. We come together to do different things as teams. It seems to me, if we can't achieve that in a better way, if we can't have the creativity and innovation in the team that we need to achieve all of that, then everybody's poorer. And we kind of put up with second best. That's not to say that sometimes as leaders we get thrust into those positions. We're not really sure what to do, and I guess I wanted to make it practical so that people can actually say, oh yes, I can see where to go from here, and there's practical steps. So I think it just comes out of a desire that people don't waste time. A lot of teams are working at sort of 60% of their potential. So what could it be like if we actually learned how to communicate with each other, learned how to relate to each other, and then got alignment, got on the same page, created a safe environment, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was at a networking meeting this morning, which I was speaking at actually, and the question came up about are leaders born, and can anyone sort of learn to lead and learn the skills to lead. And obviously you can imagine what my answer was to that, but I'm guessing you'll have a similar answer to mine.
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, I think in terms of, yes, I mean, some people are born with more leadership capability, I guess, if you wanted to put it that way. But I think it's important to realize that even if you're an athlete, even if you're good at something, you don't become excellent at something without practice, without persistence at it, without taking coaching from other people to realize what some of the things that you do which are perhaps not helping you. So all of those things, yes, I think there are some people who might have on board more natural capability, but I think anybody can learn to lead if they have a desire to lead. I mean, not everybody has a desire to lead, but people aren't going to follow you if you're constantly difficult to understand, difficult to you're not clear in your expectation, all of those things, and these are all things that you can work on quite easily. So yeah,
it's having that clear vision, isn't it, and communicating it to the team. Actually, what we're about, what we're trying to achieve here, how we're going to go about it, and ultimately why are we bothering in the first place.
Yes.
In many instances, and that's when people get disconnected to, I'm just lost about what we do here, and it's about sometimes you just need to reaffirm what the vision is. I mean, leadership is one of those things that it can be very simple in its when you describe it, but actually practically, in the battle, whatever you want to call it, they talk about a battle plan and never. It never survives the first think that the first time it comes into contact with the enemy.
Absolutely.
So we can talk about this stuff day in, day out, but actually practically on a day-to-day basis, it's about getting back down to those basic principles of understanding. You've got to have a vision, haven't you?
Yeah, got to have a vision. It's got to be clear. It's got to be compelling. You've got to be able to lead people towards it. You've got to be able to describe it. So, yeah, definitely. And, people need to know where you're going to be able to follow you. Exactly.
Good stuff. So that will obviously give you an opportunity to point us in the right direction to buy your book wherever that's going to be available at the end of the show. But the name of the topic for today's show was about agility in leadership. So do you want to just sort of frame what you mean by being agile as a leader?
Yeah, I think it's that flexibility to adjust when things change. And I think obviously with what's happened over recent months, we've seen tremendous change in a very, very short period of time. And I think, often we say, the crisis makes the leader, but actually I think the crisis reveals the leader more often. It's what's going on the inside, and I think agility is often an inside job. It's that thing of having the right things, the right understanding, the mindset, the perspective on board that says, okay, I understand who I am. I understand that this is challenging. I understand that these things are difficult. But the leader who has that onboard awareness is able to look at where the wind has changed and adjust the sails as he's going. He has built a team around him who understand those principles as well, and together they can change and flex towards what's going on. We live in a fast changing world. It's very difficult to imagine that it will ever go back to the way it was. I think we've permanently changed the way we work. So it requires the agility to say, okay, in these new circumstances, it's not that our mission has changed or our vision, but how we're actually going to deliver and how we're going to do team and how we're going to communicate. That's all got to change. So how are we going to do that?
Yeah, and I'm guessing there's some like deeper sort of skills with regards to agility where you need to sort of develop. One thing that comes to mind is about having good questioning skills. Is that something that you'd sort of agree with?
Yeah, definitely. I think the temptation sometimes is to think is to be very answer orientated. I'm going to this is the way we're going to go. Actually, we need that curiosity about us even more so at the moment. I think can we do things differently? Often we put a strategy in place, and the only time that we review it is when things are going wrong, or there's been a complete change, and that perhaps we really need to kind of start reviewing our strategies on a much more regular basis and asking ourselves questions. Can this be done differently? Can this be done in a different way? How can we deliver better to the people that we're serving? And yeah, I think questions are brilliant because questions open up a discussion. Questions open up creativity. It may be that it's even a little bit of a disagreement around all of those things, but disagreements can be really creative places if people are feeling safe enough to actually venture forth their opinion.
Mm. The question I like is, well, what would you do if I wasn't here? So you straight away you're sort of, well, I've got some that you've got you've got the answer somewhere, and if I wasn't here, you'd have to come up with it and solve whatever this problem was. So why not start with what you would do rather than just come to me as a problem solver? Because I think the biggest mistake I made when I was in my retail business was I just became the problem solver as opposed to someone. Well, what would you do if you were sat here? I'm not here. You can't ask me what would you do. And so, is there any other sort of questions that really work well for your sort of scenarios?
Well, I think you've got to be willing, like you say, if you're going to ask a question, then you've got to be willing to wait for the answer to come through. I think sometimes what we learn at school is what to think, and what we have to learn in life is how to think. And when you think about the depth of thinking that we have that's subconscious or unconscious, there's so much inside of us actually that just needs to be coaxed out. So questions like, sometimes I just ask, if your friend was sitting here with you, talking to you right now, what would he advise you to do? Or if you were advising sometimes it's easier to think about yourself talking to somebody else. And sometimes that just unlocks, all right, well, this is what I would do, or this is what I advise, and things like that. Sometimes when the pressure's on you, you kind of freeze or your mind goes blank. But actually, if we can start to ask questions in a different way, but I think they have to be open. If it's a closed question, or if we start trying to lead people, or if we ask the question why, often people become defensive. So it's, what do you think we could do differently? What are some of the things we could change? If you were going to change anything in this situation, what would it be and why? Those kinds of things. So, yeah.
What's the interesting thing is that we've sort of talked about a vision, and if you're going to have a vision, then you have to be quite explicit in the way that you describe how that's going to come about. So that in that instance, you've got to be sort of a bit directed, haven't you? You've got to say, yes, well, this is what's going to happen. But there comes a time when you've got to transition away from that to say, well, okay, where we're going, where we need to go. You have as much say in this as I do with regards to how. Yes. Where we're going. So it's about sort of having that conversation about when to sort of step back sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think all of us know there's a way that we would do something, and we may be comfortable with that. We may think, oh, that works. It's not the only way of doing something. You can have it as many different ways of doing something as the people in the room. I think the question is, yet if we're all heading in the same direction, it's having that trust in others to say, look, I'm not being prescriptive about the way that you need to get there, but these are the things that need to happen at the end of it. This is where we need to be. If you've got different ways in which you want to get there, that's fine. And kind of give people the authority, give them the resources that they need to do that, and then step back and see what happens. We don't want two visions, because division doesn't work. You end up going in two different directions. So, but within the same vision, it is possible to actually say, oh, there are different ways of getting there, and some of them might be better than the ways I've thought of. So, yeah,
and encouraging that input, isn't it? And it's another way of just taking the pressure off. I mean, I put a lot of pressure on myself, being that person that has to solve problems, and ultimately you only have a certain amount of capacity to do these things. But you actually, when you start asking the right questions and you put faith and you trust people. I mean, we haven't talked about the trust thing. Obviously, trust is so important, isn't it? To show that you trust somebody, and then allow them to make mistakes. I think that's another thing that we should be thinking about, and how we sort of allow it. Not that we make mistakes for the sake of them, but allowing mistakes to happen and how we deal with them is important, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think the difficulty, if we're in a blame culture, then it shuts down experimentation. It shuts down innovation, because people are afraid of what might happen. And are they the person that's going to get the bullet for it? Mm-hmm. If you take the view that, we've got to be competent at the things we've got to be competent at, but then in the midst of that say, okay, let's learn from this. What did we learn from this? Let's experiment. It goes back to the kind of black box thinking that we need. The aircraft industry is probably the only one where you get fired for not reporting a failure. But actually, if we actually had that place where we could actually safely say, look, I did this happened, it didn't go so well, what have I learned? You're always going to be learning, even if it doesn't turn out quite the way you thought it would be. But what shuts that down is if there's a blame culture, if somebody's looking for somebody just to take the brunt of what's going on. But if you say, okay, what have we all learned from this? Again, it's engendering that curiosity and the creativity.
Yeah, it just reminded me of that great book, Matthew Syed's book, Black Box Thinking, is a great book that sort of explains, what happens when people don't feel as if they can say something. And obviously there's a very powerful story in there. It was someone that had it was in a hospital scenario. I won't sort of spoil it, but it's very powerful in that, if only someone was able to say what had to be said, then somebody's life would have been saved, wouldn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. We need to empower people. That's the thing. I think if people feel empowered, then it's not about your authority. In fact, often I've found that when leaders empower the team members, everybody wins. The team member wins, the team wins, the leader wins, because everybody kind of steps up a gear, takes responsibility, takes ownership. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but it does actually work.
Yeah, and so with regards to agile leadership, do you see yourself as an agile leader, and how have you managed to get to that point of being an agile leader?
Well, I think sometimes you get pushed into these places, don't you? And you think you come out the other end of it, you think, wow, that was an interesting ride, but actually I've managed to change. I mean, the word that was kind of on everybody's lips over the last few months, pivoting, wasn't it? It kind of got slightly overused, but I think agile is about saying to you as a leader, think you have to lead in the sense of knowing that things will change. Things are not going to be the same all the time. So what are you going to do? Are you going to stay there? I mean, the likelihood is you'll get run over, particularly if it's a train that's following you. So I think you've got to think, how can I lead through this? You can describe it as a challenging process. That's authentic, but it doesn't mean that you've altered your vision or your mission. So I think agility, is often foisted upon you initially, but how you react to that's the key. Can you change as you say, keep asking the right questions. The questions are always going to open up options. Sometimes what happens is that fear gets in the way, and the fear kind of shuts down the analytical stuff. You become paralyzed. That's not what you want. You have to be able to step back, even if you have to go for a walk or do whatever you need to do just to take yourself out of the situation, to view it in a different way. It's about the way you view things, isn't it? Because that determines how you actually will do it.
Absolutely. And it goes back to what we said before. We talk about principles and theories all day long, but it's only in the heat of battle that we actually find out, are we sort of up for the challenge? And looking back on my retail business, there was lots of times when I had to sort of step up. Things were happening quickly, and that's when you really find out, and you've got to be there to sort of feel it and actually realise that actually this is it now. And it's easy to talk about leadership, but actually being in a leadership position, I have the greatest respect for people that, when we talk about leadership in business, obviously leadership just isn't a position, but it's when people are in that position, they've got to make tough decisions. And we've seen how different politicians around the world have coped with this scenario, this pandemic scenario, which no one's was ever prepared for.
No.
But it just shows how, some people have come out of it as heroic, others not so heroic.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's a strength. It's a test of character, isn't it? I think, you find out what's going on when those things come around. But I think nobody knew months into the pandemic what to do necessarily. Still the same things were happening, and it's okay to say that.
Yeah.
But you can still say the onboard, we're still here. Our customers still need serving. Our clients still need serving. Whatever it is, you've got to find a way of doing it. And if the culture is free enough, the culture is empowered enough, if people trust each other, then those options, those reactions, the way of changing will come about much, much quicker.
So Mark, do you want to just tell us a bit more about your journey of how you ended up being a CEO of a charity and sort of what came before that?
Yeah, I mean, I think leadership's been a long journey for me. I was originally in financial services and enjoyed doing that. We ended up, I did that for 14 years. I had my own business and found out all about that the first time round. Then we actually ended up living in India for 5 years. And you do find out about problem solving when you live in a different culture. You kind of get used to standing on your own 2 feet and thinking, well, I can think my way through this. I think that's the key. Sometimes we actually have to engage our minds and think about something. And then coming back, I thought, well, I've enjoyed being in another culture. How can I help others who are going to different cultures? And that's how I ended up, involved in a faith-based charity, just who have people being sent overseas. And it was great fun and seeing different cultures and going and visiting different things. But you find that there are just lots of the things that I did learn was never to make assumptions about people, never to. I was not to say that I didn't on occasion, but learning that actually just because you see the world in a certain way isn't the way that others see it. And I think my leadership journey has been a gradual increasing awareness of how I engage with the world, but also learning to appreciate and access other people's ways of seeing it, their voices, if you like. And knowing that the best thing I can do as a leader is to actually work and serve for the highest good of those that I lead, because then when they're leading to the highest potential, that's when everybody wins. So I think I'm not there. It's every day something new to learn. I think the day I stop learning will probably be the day I stop leading in one respect. But yeah, just keeping that. I think curiosity. I mean, as you've seen from my motivational map, I am that way inclined anyway. But I think being curious about things, asking those questions, and not being prepared to settle for what is in effect second best. I think you just have to keep pushing forward, and you can surprise yourself by what you can achieve that way.
Yeah, it's really interesting what you said about we all see things with regards to our experience, and how we see things and put things in perspective is only how we see the world, and so that only gives us a certain amount of sort of capability, because we haven't experienced certain things. And interesting you say your experiences overseas, how people how they solve problems and work with each other. There's a great guy I got to listen to last year that's a leader in the Maasai, and the way they go about solving problems, and very much talk about culture. They're very much around sticking together. No one's left behind. And that's what we really need to bring more into business, to make sure that everyone's point of view is taken into account, isn't it? And because we can, make better decisions that way. Have I lost you, Mark? Got a slight technical issue here. Hopefully, Mark will be back with us shortly. So I'll carry on talking. Hopefully Mark will come back and we can wrap things up, because I want you to be able to check out Mark's book, if you can come back and join us in a second. But in the meantime, if you're interested, it looks like we've lost Mark for the time being. We'll bring back Mark when he hopefully is able to reconnect. So if you're interested in motivations, and I suggest that anyone in a leadership position should know exactly what motivates them, then get in touch. I've created a little course around motivations, which I called How to Stay Energized at Work. It's a short 5-lesson short course where you get to complete a motivational map. And if you go to the reluctantleader.academy website and go to courses, you'll find that course there with all the details. And if you use either LinkedIn or Facebook as a coupon code, you'll save 25% on that course. Really hoping that Mark would... I've just got a message from him. So let's see what happens when we find out whether he's going to choose. We got a phone call. That's the problem with using a phone, isn't it? That's the trouble with using a phone, is that when you get a phone call, it sort of kicks in, and well, hopefully he'll come back and join us. Let's just find out if he's coming back. Hopefully he is. So in the meantime, just sort of point you in another direction of something else I've just created, is around finding out how you're doing with some success elements. So some elements that lead to greater success. And I've created a scorecard, which only takes about 2 or 3 minutes to complete, but it will tell you how you're doing with regards to those 7 elements. I'm just trying to get Mark back on just to wrap things up. So the success elements is around focusing on certain elements of how you go about things, how you feel about yourself. I think we got hopefully got Mark back with us. Let's bring Mark back in. Let's see if he's come back to us. There he is. Hello, Mark.
Sorry about that.
No, I've just explained that's the problem with using phones. So you're back now. That's fine. So I think as you come back, and before we have any more phone calls, do you want to just direct people to where they can find out more about what you do, and in particular about your book?
Yeah, sure. So if you go on my website, smartculture.uk, hopefully by the end of this coming week, you'll have a landing page that you can look at. So that you can just go into there and find that. I'll probably put things up on LinkedIn as well. I have a LinkedIn page under my name, which you can look up. But yeah, all being well, by the end of this week, there'll be a landing page by which you can have a look and see what the content of the book's about, and get an idea of whether it's for you or not.
Fabulous. That's great stuff. Well, it's a shame we lost you, but you come back just to wrap things up. Anything else you wanted to sort of finish off with before you go back and get on with today's agenda?
No, I think I'm just finding out how to be agile with technology.
Haven't we all? Yes, I know. It's always a challenge. We had a challenge at the beginning and another challenge thrown at us. But anyway, we got through it all. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Really enjoyed it, Mark. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. We'll hopefully catch up soon, and I'll be buying your book, I'm sure, when I see how I can do that.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. That's
Thanks
great.
a lot.
All right, bye now.
Bye. Great stuff. So that was enjoyable, and check out Mark's book and also Smart Culture, because that's a really important aspect of culture, getting our culture right. The thing to remember is that you've always got a culture. It's whether you are actually doing anything to make sure it's the right culture. Paul, good to see you, Paul. Hopefully see you shortly at networking. Thanks for joining. So culture is about having, you've got it whether you realise it or not, and the more you can do to make it the right culture for you and your business, the better. So I think I've already said all the things I normally say at the end of the show. You know where to catch me. The links at the bottom there. And there's the How to Stay Energized at Work course, which includes the motivational map, which you might be interested in. And remember to use the coupon code LinkedIn or Facebook. So for now, that's the end of the show. And I look forward to the next episode of the Get Savvy Show. So I'll see you then.